Conscient Podcast, episode 188. Performing artist and cultural climate leader, Dawit Seto.
Having a conversation about the artworks, having a conversation about these important issues as a climate change is, it's always, as we see it everywhere in the globe, it's important for us also in the Horn of Africa region to talk about through art, not politics necessarily. I feel like it opens a little bit door, a little bit more than the politics.
Dawit Seto is an Ethiopian performing artist specializing in contemporary dance and choreography, who is currently based in Switzerland, and whose artistic work intricately weaves together the stories of migrant histories from East Africa and engages in vigorous advocacy for climate justice in all of his artistic pursuits. And you'll hear him talk with passion about the role of art in his life and for his communities. And through his dedication to storytelling via movement, Dawit transcends physical borders, amalgamating diverse influences and social consciousness into his creations, rendering them both captivating and socially impactful. And I experienced this when I saw his videos. Immersing in the intricate exploration of movement language within Ethiopia's vibrant traditional dance heritage, Dawit infuses his artistic works with an authentic cultural richness that resonates with global audiences. It certainly resonated with me when I first heard Dawit at a Creative Climate Leadership alumni meeting on February 18th, 2024, where he spoke about the impact of climate change in Eastern Africa. Our conversation took place on June 12th, 2024 by Zoom. Here's an excerpt from our conversation that positions why he participates in meetings like Creative Climate Leadership Network.
I myself witnessed the disaster what climate change can do. I see it in my age, and it was in my grandfather's age. And for me, whenever this international seminars or meetings happening and talking about a future, it just makes me scared. And because I saw it in my age, I saw it. It was not for future for me, climate. Climate it was about yesterday. It was about today. So yeah, because of that, I want to be a part of any conversation as much as I can handle because of also resource. And yeah, we're working on this, mobilizing, having a conversation, witnessing the disaster that we face.
Our conversation helped me understand a lot of things, including the impact of the climate crisis in the Horn of Africa and how artists such as Dawit are engaging with these issues through artistic creation and cultural leadership. So welcome to the Conscient Podcast, Dawit Seto.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. And we met,
Oh,
interestingly, just a few weeks ago online. The Creative Climate Leadership course that you took this year and I took in 2020 was our point of contact. And we only met for a few minutes in one of those little speed dating things. And I was interested in your work. And so, we communicated. And then I thank you for taking the time to speak with me today about your art practice and your understanding of what art and climate leadership is, right? Because we've taken a course, more or less the same course, but we come from different backgrounds. So what does all that mean? But let's start at the beginning and have you introduce yourself, talk about your background, your training, and then we'll jump into uh, your practice and so on and so forth.
well, thank you very much for having me again. My name is Dawit Seto. I am an Ethiopian artist, at the moment based in Switzerland, Bern. That's why we met actually. I got an opportunity to be a part of the climate leadership program from Switzerland, and yeah, that's how it start our first interaction. And yeah, my work is mostly I'm a performing artist, dancer, choreographer, and yeah, I really do love working about climate issues, especially about climate justice. Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute, but tell me more about your background. You were raised in Ethiopia. Was it an artistic family or what were your origins?
Well, yeah, I was born and raised in Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia. And well, I grew up in a normal family. I don't think anyone is an artist.
Mm.
I mean, an artist does something in theater in a way, but life has makes them artists.
Mhm.
um, yeah, my father was a gardener in the university. Yeah, he's not. Yeah, and my mother was a housemaid. Actually, she was living in a Gulf country as well to raise me,
Mm.
to give us a better future. And I think it started also about migration from her, I would say, going to somewhere else to do something, start from my mother. Yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, I studied there in Addis Ababa, and later on, I got an opportunity to go and study about dance, African traditional dance, and a contemporary dance in West Africa, École de Sable. It was a 3 years program, um, coming different African artists from the diaspora and from the continent about the culture and about also a contemporary, what is contemporary in an African context, so on and so. We did yeah, a promotion on that for 3 years. And after that, going back home, working on different cultural activities, being a part of research programs about deeply in the, yeah, rural areas, in the village. Yeah, that has been a journey. Yeah.
So, so maybe tell me more about your art practice. You combine. I saw some of the videos, beautiful videos on your website, but how would you describe your art practice?
My art practice is, as I said, I do a performing art. I love dancing, and I also get the first introduction, I would say, from my grandfather. about a movement, about dance, about performing. Um, yeah, I've got an opportunity to visit him when I was, I think, around 4 or 5. My mother was told me that, and in the moment when we visit them, the river was full, and we cannot manage to go to the other village. And then me, I was being a boy, and I asked him, what can you do when this happens? And I think that was the first performance I've get to learn. And he told me that about their rituals, what they do when the river is full and when there's a drought coming, and what kind of movement they do, what kind of atmosphere and spirituality, how they come together, the way they call each other to the neighborhoods. That was the first performance I had, and I think since I would say since that point I start really focusing about this movement, yeah, practice, rituals, and yeah, that's how it starts. And then later on, yeah, focusing on the college. After the college, I've got, as I said, I got the opportunity to go to this dance school, and then back again start uh, finding myself in a way, knowing about our reality in Ethiopia as we're somehow confined, I would say, um, even before COVID. And knowing that we're having so much this human-made conflict, and also about the climate change. It was happening a lot. So as an artist, I thought about to do something, and yeah, that's where it comes. My first video about climate justice issue called Swarm Locust. Swarm Locust start actually. I was trying to do a film project and going around to the village with me and my film crews. And during that moment, I don't know if you remember in 2020 in the Horn of Africa, we're having a terrible the swarm locust going from the Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, and the Horn of Africa region was really disaster. And that happened in our eyes. And there was not much technology. It was 2020, but there wasn't much technology that to make any change. And what was really interesting for me back and then was people try to do their own rituals. They try to come out as a people coming together, and they do the smoking. They use their, fifing, singing. They do really use their traditional methods to undo the damage. And witnessing that makes me, yeah, I have to do something. And that's why I start doing it. And most of the movement that has been in the video was captured from the people performing while this disaster happening. So it's a take from the disaster. That's how I started.
Right. And well, I'll put the link to the video in the episode notes and people can watch the video and
Mhm.
be, but of course, it's site specific as well, right? So I assume that one has to also have seen and felt the space to have some idea of what you're talking about. It's hard for me to imagine a locust swarm, you know. We've had insect infections here in Canada, but I've never experienced that. So I'm always curious to know how how artists want to address complex issues like climate disruption and ecological disaster and conflict and humanitarian crises. What is your approach generally? How do you think your art can help a situation like that? What does it do to? to make it better?
I think I would say, as someone who lived most of his life in Ethiopia and knowing the circumstances, I would say, I think I have to highlight, I have to give a light. Uh, we have to communicate to the people what's happening in the region also. I think most people, they're not aware of what's going on in the region. At the same time that we were filming This Is Warm Locust, it was the same day was the civil war broke out. In the meantime, I was working also the conflicts and then the climate issues. But these are the things that I think we have to also address to the global, to the public, not necessarily only Ethiopians or not necessarily only Somali or Eritreans or Kenyans, but I think in a globe, people has to know what's happening and what we're trying to do also to solve these problems in a way.
A type of mix of journalism, reporting, storytelling, witnessing, all those things combined, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, I'm interested in this notion of leadership as well, because climate, cultural leadership. How do you see leadership, or lack thereof, it could be as well, in the cultural sector in and around climate, and how does it manifest itself, or how do you see it?
I think for me, it's a leadership is a practice, and the practice has to somehow justify that works or not for me. And in our context, most of the damage happens in the Horn of Africa region, especially when we talk about climate issues, because of we're having constantly conflicts also. Maybe that's also one of the factor. Uh, but also having unstable political system around there is it doesn't make us to work on the issue that we need to work on. Uh, Very importantly about climate issues, we're not able to focus on that because of an instability of the political system, instability of the leadership. Um, as an artist, uh, our role is to reflect this point, uh, but also as safety is as an issue. How do you how do you work without being censored? Is another issue. Living in the unstable political areas, if I might say the right word. Yeah, if I'm making a sense.
No, it makes
So
sense. I mean, the colonialism in different parts of the world are these are some of the reasons why there's instability and resource extraction and exploitation and capitalism and all of those things. So these are not secrets. These are the way of the world, and there's a lot of suffering. And I found that art helps in many ways. The stories sometimes they remind people of their background, their traditions, their culture. Sometimes there's stories from other places that are inspiring, that allow them to think differently, or other people's ways of being and that kind of thing. But sometimes it's just being
yeah,
together around an artistic experience, feeling a little bit of safety, a little bit of comfort, a little bit of hope. That's what I felt when I saw your video. It was slow moving and seemed to integrate traditional movement. I don't know, but it seemed
yeah,
that with contemporary work. And then maybe a lot of people can connect to that in different ways. Those who are more in traditional ways and more in contemporary. So you're kind of a bridge maker. That sounds like to me.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, as an artist, I think that's I take my role leading on that. Also, I think having a conversation about the artworks, having a conversation about these important issues as a climate change is it's always, as we see it everywhere in the globe, it's important for us also in the Horn of Africa region to talk about through art, not politics necessarily. I feel like it opens a little bit door, a little bit more than the politics. That was the opportunity also me having working on this a few projects about the climate change. It opens a doors me working on those projects videos and then showing them in different world and then going back to where the problem is, and it opened up for a lot of conversation. And I think that was the plan since the beginning, also to have a conversation about it. Yeah.
Well, certainly the Julie's Bicycle in the UK organized the climate creative climate leadership, and mine was in the US, in Arizona. And of course, the US is a very wealthy country and very dominant. And it was really interesting. It was right at the beginning of COVID, mid-March of 2020. So we were all a bit nervous about being together because you didn't know, right? And so it was interesting to have I've noticed in the different leadership courses that people take away different things. Some come back with knowledge about climate change, what it is, what it isn't, the role of art, and others explore more regional issues like what does it mean to be a leader in a country where there's, like you say, a political instability? What kind of risks do we take? What kind of solidarity can we have with each other? That's why that call where I met you was really nice because I met Karin Klassens, who is going to be in an episode that will have been broadcast by now. And so you meet people, and then you realize that you have affinities. You're doing similar work, but in very different contexts. And you just need to listen. You need to hear the stories, see the work, try to put yourself in the place of the people, and not make assumptions, but just absorb that information, those sensations. So what's next for you? What are you working on right now?
I am working on, as migrated myself to Switzerland. The last 2, 3 years, I've been working on about knowing the migrant people, get to know each other in different formats. Um, I have been focusing on about their movement, about their music, a bit about their rituals, if they brought it from their region to their home, the new home here. And I have been my focus on also at the same time, if they're want to be a part of the solution maker, because it's completely a different lifestyle we're living here. It's peaceful. You can do whatever you want. It's completely a different setting. And most of us, when we come, as we know the struggle about climate issues, and people are really complaining about it. But when we come here, it's the priority is changed. I I can understand people will have a different priorities when you move away. But as an artist, I wanna stick on that. And I feel like this is maybe a way for me to send back a channels, maybe to start a conversation from the diaspora or the migrant community to back home. Because one of the things I'm working on this is we see the change about during COVID time. Most of the people, I mean, I would say most of the people has a relative who lives in Europe or in America or in Canada. Whatever information comes from here, Sometimes it might help, or sometimes it's not important also. But I want to work on the channels from here to advocate about climate justice and climate change through the channels. Because, yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, the diaspora has more power, finance also, sustainability also. And I am trying to work on these areas if the migrant community would love to help me to do an artwork about the climate change and climate justice back in home and here at the same time. And as a migrant myself, want to be a part of the conversation. Uh, I myself witnessed the disaster what climate change can do. I see it in my age, and it was in my grandfather's age. And for me, whenever this international seminars or meetings happening and talking about a future, it just makes me scared. And because I saw it in my age, I saw it. It was not for future for me, climate. Climate it was about yesterday. It was about today. So yeah, because of that, I want to be a part of any conversation as much as I can handle because of also resource. And yeah, we're working on this mobilizing, having a conversation, witnessing the disaster that we faced. Mine is not a big thing. It might be not a big thing, but there's a people really, really faced the challenge more than I do. So yeah, these are the few things I'm working on.
Well, I'm happy to hear that because I'm sure there will be more climate refugees around the world inevitably as some places become too hot to live or too little food or too much conflict. Well, there's all kinds of things that can happen. And to have connections and ways of collaborating across different places of the world through different diaspora, I think that's a really good thing and to do and for us to learn to do because the planet will be disrupted and we want to do everything we can to keep everyone safe, you know. And I think of the term refugee more than immigration because at one point it will be migration, but it won't be it will just be people will have to, and as they have throughout Africa and many places of the world, they have to move and when they have to move. So I do appreciate that you're working on that, and that's why one of the reasons I wanted you to be on the podcast to tell that story. So now it's being listened to, and to further reflect on art, the role of art in crisis situations. One of my guests recently is a Canadian artist from Pakistan who said that during the floods in Pakistan, a lot of art was created because people needed to express themselves and to both create and receive art. Has that been your experience that in difficult times that people turn to art and song and dance for all kinds of reasons? Is there more art created during crisis?
Definitely, definitely. Um, I think we're praying. I think we're singing. I think we're dancing. It's definitely a creation time when this disaster is happening, and also that's what I was trying to also capture and then to show these movements in different settings in my projects. Every project that I did is I take out the things that I witnessed and then put them in different settings and to show in different circumstance. So yeah, it did create a lot of movement, also a lot of uh, coming together, a lot of support, a lot of anyway struggles at the same time. Also, mourning together. Also, I think for me it's an art, especially when the people don't come together most of the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
mourning and yeah, different. uh, rituals, ceremonies. They can be simple, they can be traditional, they can be contemporary, and sometimes using technology, right? You and I are not in the same room here, but we're communicating. So we do what we can.
Yeah.
But before we end, I wanted to come back to the idea of climate justice because those are two very powerful words, right? The climate change, the issues around climate, and then the justice. How can we correct wrongs? I did a course once called Facing Human Wrongs, that kind of idea. So, what is climate justice to you?
I think it's everything.
Mm.
Um, for me, as first of all, we can start the conversation about the climate justice. Is what's our contribution for this is more important, and I think I'm sure you are aware of it, but as a continent, is the contribution about the pollution as CO2 is, I think, very less than one country can make the damage or the humanation make. So for me, as climate justice is, it's about living today. It's about also about my grandfather that he struggled before he passed away. And it's about my dad. It's about my mom. It's about me. And it's going to be about my daughter, my son. That's why I cannot really say climate justice is only in this direction for me. It has been everywhere since I know my grandfather. And yeah, that's why I'm trying to since I am living in here in Europe, uh, uh, whenever the demonstration or the strike is happening about climate, uh, for future is I would love to go there, but I go with the emotion of a climate justice, not for future. Yeah, I think that's all about me.
Makes
Yeah.
sense to me because you began this conversation talking about your grandfather and your parents and your community, and to say that climate justice is everything makes sense. It's not one thing to correct, right? It's like if we find the solution to climate justice, everything will be fine. It's not like that. It's like the existence on Earth and our relationship with the Earth and the just relation between peoples and countries and regions. I think I
Yeah.
know what you mean. And I also feel it in your artwork, which I think is also important because words can only go so far but when you see the gestures and you see the poetry and the music in your work, really do get a feeling of um, transcendence, right? You're
Yeah.
transcending traditions, you're transcending messages, you're talking about the past, the present, and the future at the same time. I think.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah. 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 The last video I did was about the wind is here. Uh, I was in, I think, like 20 minutes walk from where I grew up, the river. After 10 years going back in that place for me was a shock. There was no water in the river anymore. That's the river I start swimming. I learned there in the river. That has been a part of my artwork. And I needed justice for that river. The minimum, uh, the maximum to the people, not only in Horn of Africa, not only in Ethiopia, not only in Eritrea, but over everywhere. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
a lot of people consider rivers living beings. I certainly do. It's the way I relate to them. coexistence of river, water, fish. But we could go on because it's such an interesting conversation across continents and across cultures to just to have and to listen and to be together for a bit. Um, I want to end with the way I do most episodes, which I ask people what they're reading or they're viewing, anything that has struck to them that they'd like to share with our audiences.
I would love to share a music.
Mhm.
I think this is the famous, it is the famous Nigerian musician Fela Kuti, Waternaga Inami. And um, the other thing I would love to share is a photo project, the artwork made by the famous Ethiopian photographer. Her name is Aida Mulunech. The title is Water Life. These are the two things I would love to share with you today.
Well, you've shared a lot. Thank you so much for your time, Dawit, and we will talk again.
Thank you very much for having me.